Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast. My name is Tommy, and I'm here, as always, with my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. We've had a few episodes of activity that we haven't been able to see it in person, and now we are entering the true desert of the offseason.
The desert of all off seasons, in my opinion, because no hockey, no basketball.
Hockey just ended last night. Basketball ended, 2 nights ago? And
no football for
So we got
41 days, no college football. It's just regular season.
Somebody else was like, no Premier League.
Yep. It's just regular season baseball, and it's all we got. But, that doesn't mean we don't have football to talk about, because football is 365 days a year, in my opinion, even in the doldrums. So we are still going to be here.
And we can invent content any day of the year.
100%, and we do, often, all the time. We're very good at it, or at least we'd like to think so. But anyway, so we're still going to be bringing you...
In our own minds.
Yes,
we're
still going to be bringing you an episode a week every single week until the season starts, and then we'll be doing 2 a week like we always do. If you like the content you hear, come give us a follow on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We post when we have new episodes. We retweet articles we find interesting, pieces of news, keep you up to date on everything Packers, help promote other great creators that we particularly like and think that Packers fans would enjoy reading and hearing from and become more educated in doing so about football. And if you really like what you hear, come subscribe to us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find podcasts, you can find us. You can even find us on YouTube. We post all of our episodes there, so if you subscribe to us there, that'd really help our numbers, and we'd appreciate it. But, Dad, so, like you said, we are pretty much in the dog days of football, so not a whole lot of news items to get to, although there are a couple here.
Speaking of dog days, great song at the end of Guardians 3.
You're like a month late on this. It took you so long to get.
It's because I was a month late watching the movie.
That's what I'm saying. Is it took you a month too long to go see that movie. Your references are as dated as always.
I'm sure. That could be much more dated than that. I'm sure I'll have something to say about Spider-Verse 2 in another month.
Oh, that quickly. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about some Packers news, though. The first news item is Adrian Amos has officially signed with the Jets, continuing the great migration eastward of many Packers. I think we're up to 8 former Packers on the Jets.
I think that's what I saw today. So you got
Rodgers,
Lazard, Cobb,
Billy Turner, Malik
Taylor. Can't tell you. Malik Taylor, not Malik Turner. Billy Turner, Malik Taylor, Hackett, Boyle,
7, and Amos, 8. That makes 8. But yeah, so there were a lot of people who thought that might be someone the Packers might be open to a reunion with. I think even Gutekunst said the door wasn't shut there, but now the door is officially shut as he signs that deal with the Jets, presumably to be their starter at safety. Good for him. He had a bit of a down year last year, but he was a very good Packer while he was here. Beyond that, also other former Packers in the news, Chris Barnes signing with the Cardinals. Good to see him kind of getting back, getting another spot, even if it is with a team that might not be the most successful next year. Maybe he'll have a lot of playing time. Beyond that,
a chance to show what he can do on a team that needs players.
Yeah, that's true. Although they don't really need linebackers because they have multiple first-round picks that they already don't really play. But anyway,
maybe he could play QB.
This is not a Cardinals podcast. But anyway, in terms of minicamp, we've had minicamp Tuesday and Wednesday, and then tomorrow is going to be kind of a just go have fun type day. It sounds like LaFleur said that the team is in the best physical shape that he's seen with his time under the Packers in terms of just like cardio, et cetera, et cetera. And so they're giving them Thursday off, which they often do. Most teams do. They have Thursdays like a team building thing. And we're going to talk all about today.
I haven't heard whether it's like paintball or
it's been
whatever
paintball. It's been bowling in the past. It's usually something like that. But we're going to talk today, as we're kind of wrapping up the off season, we are going to talk each about 5 things that we found most interesting from the off-season practices, whether that's OTAs, minicamp, or even rookie camp. Beyond that, though, we are first going to talk just a little bit about attendance today. So going to talk a little bit about minicamp attendance and then not do as deep of a dive into the actual individual practice today as we usually do, because we're going to talk about some more wider spread things from practice to practice. But today and yesterday, in terms of attendance, perfect attendance, except for a couple players who were excused for personal reasons, and those were Tarvarius Moore, the safety, and Matt Orzek, presumably the starting long snapper. And then other players not practicing due to injury, and these were from Ryan Wood and Rob Domovsky on Twitter. Players not practicing because of injury: Dallin Levitt, Eric Stokes, Rashawn Gary, Jake Hansen, Tyler Davis, Grant DeBose, Chris Slayton. And so those, in addition to Moore and Orzek, were not practicing, but everyone else was participating in these minicamp practices, which are mandatory, unlike OTAs. So those were the main pieces of news for the Packers. Dad, should we get into our more interesting things from practice, or do you want to talk a little bit about some Bears smack talk that we've received from Justin Jones, defensive tackle from the
Jones,
Bears.
A player I'd never heard of before the other day. So you hear a lot of the jokes like, who? It's like, no, literally, I hadn't heard of this guy. Defensive tackle for the Bears. And, well, it's the season for the Bears to feel good about themselves.
You mean the off-season?
The off-season, exactly. It's the best time of year. And, rivals should talk smack. But, of course, you got to be able to take it.
Yep.
When it comes back and hits you in the face.
And
which, more often than not, it comes back and hits the Bears in the face.
Yeah, and we'll see, Maybe they'll be better this year. History says probably not. I mean, we'll see.
I think I will go out on a limb and say they will be better than they were last year.
It would be hard to be worse. 3 wins is the line.
That's how far out of the limb I will go.
It really makes me think, though, what is their over-under win total this year? Theirs is 7.5. Same as the Packers, I think it's which is pretty interesting.
Same as the Packers, I'd take that bet.
Yeah.
The Packers have more wins than the Bears.
I mean, I think most of that comes down to the unknown of Jordan Love, which is, it's fair. We haven't seen him play much. It's reasonable, but we have seen the Bears play. So
exactly,
that's all I'm going to say.
Where's that 7.5 coming from? Yeah, they've added something, but
I
people think that they might win the division. Is like, is every other team going to win 5 games?
I mean, I think that mostly comes from lack of confidence. I think that's mostly lack of confidence in the other 3 teams than anything, because it's like, okay, the Lions were pretty good last year, but still Jared Goff. The Vikings won 1 billion one-score games last year. They're going to regress.
And obviously, the Vikings front office had no faith in the makeup of last year's team.
Oh, yeah, they're blowing that thing up. You see, they might trade Daniil Hunter.
I saw he was asking for a trade, or they might trade him, and it's like just get rid of everybody.
The other was
looks like they're getting rid of everybody except Justin Jefferson.
That's what I would do. Seems like a good idea. Beyond that, though, but yeah, so it's always good to have smack talk and rivalries, though. I think it's good for the sport. I think it's good for, it's good for the Packers too. Hey, no such thing as bad press. The more people talk about us, the better. And I understand maybe some people thinking the Bears might be better this year. I would be surprised. I have several friendly wagers with some friends about who is going to win more games this year, but we'll keep those off the air. Beyond that, though, Dad, do you want to start talking about what we have found most interesting from these off-season practices so far?
Sure. I think we could talk about our impressions, or where we think who's looking good, who's standing out.
Yeah.
Should we take turns? You want to go?
Yeah, we'll go every other. And I just want to kind of give us a little bit of lead in here. This was really freeform. As the practices wind to a close, we kind of just wanted to talk about our main takeaways from the series of practices because, we have, 41 days until training camp starts. The first practice is not till July 25th. So these are just kind of some things to keep in your mind and think about as you think about the upcoming Packers season. They can be anything from how a certain player looked to how a player's being deployed to what coaches are saying about certain players, et cetera, et cetera. I haven't really seen your 5 yet, and I don't know if you've seen a whole lot of my 5 yet, maybe just a peek here or there. But we're kind of these are things that kind of gave us pause or kind of made us interested or we have questions about. And, just going to kind of chat about them here as we wrap up the off season pretty much. I think the training camp is part of the real season in my opinion. It's not really off season to me.
Right. I don't think they call it off season anymore. It's just the next season.
Yeah. But, Dad, do you want to start us off with your first thing that you found interesting from these series practices?
Okay, so the first thing that caught my mind is the offensive line battle. Particularly, let's start with right tackle. It seems like Zach Tom and Josh Nijman are alternating as the starting right tackle depending on the practice. So Tom started with the ones in the first minicamp practice yesterday, as we're recording this, and Nijman started with the ones in the second minicamp practice today. I got both those from Andy Herman. I think Ryan Wood may have confirmed some of those alignments as well. They also switched off who was starting in the OTAs that were open to the media as well, with Tom getting 2 starts with the ones and Nijman getting 1 start in the 3 OTA practices that were open to the media. So that's kind of interesting. So that seems to be very fluid. And they're both actually, I think in each practice, they're both kind of rotating in with the first group. It's just a matter of who gets the first turn with the first group, I think. So I think this particular battle is the least settled on the offensive line. As opposed to the rest, which, despite comments at the beginning of offseason about how the battles for center, right guard and right tackle were all kind of up in the air, and really, like, Myers has started at center in every open practice, and Runyon at right guard as well, to be like the first person up with the ones. Tom has taken some snaps as the number 2 center, particularly I think when Josh was in at right tackle. And even Sean Ryan has got a few reps at center.
Yeah, but none with the ones.
None with the ones. Right. They're just, this is, the Sean Ryan thing with at center is one of those Oren Burks as an edge rusher scenario, in my personal opinion. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Is it more Oren Burks as an edge rusher or James Looney as a tight end? Which is it more? Because
if they switch Ryan to a tight end, if they switch Ryan to a tight end, then we'll know.
There's levels to this, because I do think so. I think it's a bit telling that they spent a 3rd-round pick on Ryan last year. They had a lot of flux at the guard spots when you look at Jake Hansen and Royce Newman getting a lot of play at guard early in the season. And the fact that
in the preseason and then in the first couple weeks of the season,
of last year, and Ryan didn't even touch the field, didn't even sniff the field, wasn't even active.
And so just like listeners, what that means, I don't know how much you paid attention to the preseason and training camp last year, but the story out of training camp last year was like, this is the best defensive line ever. They're just killing it. They're crushing that offensive line. You know why? Because Royce Newman was at tackle and Jake Hansen was at guard. And they still couldn't get Sean Ryan in the lineup.
Yeah, couldn't even get Sean Ryan in the active. Like, he wasn't even the top 48 players. Like, he was not even dressed for games. It was not great. But yeah, so
he
that's
was
what I think
barely a step above Jonathan Ford.
Yeah,
in his activity in games.
Yeah, and that was. And here's that, and the other part from the O-line, just to go back away from Sean Ryan for a second, is for the offensive line, I think the thing that I find interesting, so 2 things I want to ask you about very quickly. So it seems that right tackle is the most up for grabs. I would say, to me, center is the one that I have the next biggest question marks about. I understand them wanting to get Josh Myers, they want Josh Myers to win that job, and I understand that. You spent a 2nd-round pick on him. Are you at all surprised that we have Myers taking snaps at center, we have Tom taking snaps at center, we don't have Elton taking any snaps at center, given the fact that he was a starting center in college for multiple years? Now, Tom was as well, but are you at all surprised that we're not seeing any Elton at center?
A little, I suppose, though. Maybe they just said that they want to just settle Elton into left guard and make, and as I think, because Bakhtiari or Elton said, we want to be the best left side of the line in the league. And maybe having that set up for Jordan Love's blind side is the path they're taking. I do feel like I kind of feel better about the quality of play they're going to get at right tackle, whether it's Tom or Josh Nijman, than the comfort I have at center based on Myers' play last year. I think both Tom and Nyman were better in their snaps last year at tackles than Myers was at center.
I agree. I hadn't thought of it like that, but that's a good, valid point, and I think I 100% agree. I think that last year, once we got down to Bakhtiari, Elton, Myers, Runyon, whoever was at right tackle, I would say consistently, my feeling at least, just watching the games, was that center was the shakiest position. And it's kind of, I was going to say, it's like, well, he's only a second-year player. It's like, well, Tom's only a first-year player. So it's like, can't really make that excuse. Center's a complicated position. It's probably one of the hardest ones to adapt to, going from college to the pros, because you got to know all the protections, and especially when you're working with Rodgers when he's changing everything at the line all the time. There's probably
how am I supposed to see those finger signals when you're standing at my butt?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like when you have that big of like a heavy mental load, I could see like being a step slow to spots and that being a problem. We'll see if like another year in the system. I would say, I mean, he's only played like 19 games, right? Like something like that, where it's
did he have a stretch of like 10 missed games or something? It was, first he had the finger problem, and then he had the knee injury. I forget what his second injury was. He had some kind of leg injury.
Yeah, finger and then knee. He has played 23 games, so he only played six as a rookie, and then 17 last year. So you could almost argue that
he did miss 10 as a rookie. Okay.
Yeah, you could almost argue that last year was his rookie year, and you can give him a little bit of grace for that. We'll see, though, because it's kind of put up or shut up time in his third year, because I don't think that job is necessarily saved for him, like, if this year goes poorly. Let's move on to the next one, though, and I'll talk a little bit about mine, unless you wanted to talk at all more about
go ahead and switch to yours.
Yeah, my first one that I found interesting is also on the offensive side of the football, and that was that Luke Musgrave is with the starters in pretty much every single practice, and that's 21 personnel, so that's 2 running backs and a tight end, 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end. Like, any which way you cut it, it is pretty much always Luke Musgrave out there, and he's getting a lot of looks. And to quote Jordan Love, this tweet was tweeted out by Ryan Wood, quote, "He's going to be a great player. He's a lot faster than I think anybody thought. He picked up the offense really fast. He's getting a lot of reps right now, which is great for him. He's making the most of it. He's looked really smooth running routes on, and that was the end of the quote. And then the rest of this is me. He's looked really smooth running routes on film. I do still occasionally see him tripping over himself a little bit on out routes, but we're not going to worry about that right now. It's still practice.
And a couple like double catches here and there.
Yeah, I think those are the two big like question marks about him, is balance and double catching. He has been a real weapon, it seems like, in the middle of the field for the Packers, which we know Green Bay has had trouble attacking in the past, and whether or not that's Rodgers' proclivity to attack the sidelines or the offense, or not having the players to attack the middle of the field, could be a combination of all of those things, but it definitely seems like Musgrave might be one of the keys to unlocking that middle of the field. I know it's a lot to ask a tight end in their rookie year to be a major piece of the offense, but if you think
it doesn't happen very often.
No, it does not. But if you think of him as more of a receiver and less of a true tight end, I know everyone has to block in this offense, and I think I mentioned this when they drafted him, is like, if he's almost in like an Alan Lazard type role, where he's playing a lot of big slot and like just like kind of condensing down and standing up a lot, not playing with his hand in the dirt too much, I think that might be an easier transition for him from college to the pros than like a traditional tight end would have. And I mean, so far it seems like the Packers are like really ready to like just roll him out there week one. And I do find it also interesting, kind of tie in with that, is they're not running much empty personnel at all, it seems. As high as they were on Toure, it seems like Reed is getting a lot of those slot snaps to start, and then they're just having Musgrave out there anyways, and not really running much Reed and Toure and Dobbs and Watson all together. They pretty much have had a tight end out there almost all of the starting like offensive like groups that I've seen.
I don't know if they've done any 5 wide without or anything like without a tight end,
or even 4 wide,
or even
10 personnel. It seems like they have a tight end or a fullback on the field in almost every personnel grouping. I don't know. That was something I found interesting, is the heavy usage of Musgrave so far so quickly for a position that is generally hard to learn. I think it's very promising for his prospects this year, and maybe he could be a really important weapon attacking that middle of the field. Did you have anything on the tight ends you wanted to talk about Musgrave in particular, or do you want to go to yours?
Let's see. What did I want to say? I think, at least in the first practice, I was looking through the notes. Looked like the first time they did 12 personnel, it was Musgrave and I think DeGuara.
Yeah,
maybe that was when Kraft was hurt.
If you want to call that 12 personnel. I have not seen Kraft with the starters at all in any of the things that I've seen. When it's been 12 personnel, it's always been DeGuara and Musgrave. Mm-hmm. And DeGuara might as well be a fullback now, so it's pretty much 21 personnel.
Well, he was with the fullback group,
which I think is
OTAs.
I think is good because that's pretty much his best spot. That's what he does best.
Made a really nice one-handed grab
on air. Who cares? I don't care.
So you're not putting a whole lot of weight in that diving catch that Toure made against nobody, huh?
No, I mean it's fun to watch. I enjoy those clips getting posted. Don't get me wrong. I find them fun, but I'm not going to take those clips and try and prognosticate like, hey, I'm going
to prognosticate that Luke Musgrave looks very smooth and fast. Again,
that's fine, but I'm going to tell you, I would be surprised if DeGuara catches anything past 30 yards down the field this year. I'd be very surprised.
That would be a yes. I don't think that's his game, but he's going to get. What about taking another 5-yard screen to the house from 60 yards out?
That was honestly almost more surprising. If I'm going to be honest, like him with the ball in his hands going 70 yards, pretty surprising. I think the second longest play of Jordan Love's career.
Yeah.
Only the Christian Watson play?
The Christian Watson touchdown, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, go ahead with your second one, though.
So let's see. So my second one was about the sort of wide receiver lineups, and you touched on this a little bit. It seems that with 12 and 21 personnel being the most common alignments to start with, I've had two receivers out there most of the time. Those have always been Watson and Dobbs. And it always seems like Reed has had the first crack in the slot so far. Is apparently looking really fast out there, looking really good. Despite all the amount they've been pumping up Toure, when they're starting in with three receivers, it seems to be Reed ahead, and he's been the first sort of the first starting lineup a bunch of times so far in OTAs and minicamp. I would say so far about that injuries have kind of derailed a little bit of this. Unfortunately, I think Dubose has not participated in a single practice open to the media. And as far as I can tell, I don't know if he's and I haven't heard anything. Of course, can't hear anything about whether he's participated in any of the others that the media weren't at. And do you remember, did he do anything in the rookie minicamp?
He was injured for both the days of the rookie minicamp as well. I don't think, just based on the sample we have, which is the open OTAs to the press, rookie camp, and minicamp, he hasn't practiced in any of those. So I would assume that he has not practiced at all.
That was my guess as well. Wicks has also missed some time, but he was back out running routes yesterday, looking pretty good. And then apparently he dropped out of practice for a while, but then practiced again today. Was back out on the field. So whatever he dropped out with yesterday wasn't too serious.
And I think it's interesting, though, that, yes, we've had some injuries, so that might have kind of shaken up the depth chart a little bit. But so far, it seems like, since we're talking about receivers, Watson, Dobbs, which I think is locked 1 and 2 right now. I think Dobbs has actually had a really nice offseason so far, based on what I've seen.
Killing it. And he's been like the way ahead of last year. Yeah, I should say we're talking about that sort of the starting receivers, like even Jair. He didn't catch a whole. He got a touchdown against me today. I don't know. I didn't actually listen to some of the quotes, but so I wanted to give him a hug, and because he didn't catch a single thing against me last year.
Yeah, and LaFleur has said he's looked incredible this offseason. Multiple players have talked about how improved he looks. Specifically, LaFleur is the one that I remember off the top of my head. But I think that's interesting because I definitely thought there was a world where Reed might pass him for that number 2 spot and Dobbs might kind of fall to the 3. From that, though, Reed has seemed to be the 3. Samori Toure has been the 4. Malik Heath has kind of been the 5th guy, it seems like, which is very interesting. Undrafted free agent out of Ole Miss.
Yeah,
Not
we
the
could
best
jump
athlete,
down to that.
Do you have that later?
I have that later. I have a little.
Okay, we'll talk about the unfuzz later. We'll talk about the unfuzz
with the most buzz.
Okay, we'll move to mine though, because I think the receivers is interesting, and I think the only thing I really wanted to add to that was that Dobbs seems to be kind of locking down that 2 spot when you could think that maybe Reed might jump him with the draft capital they spent on him,
and maybe getting a little stronger, a little more confident. Maybe he's worked in his release package, because one thing I think would really kind of improve his sort of performance in the league would be getting off press man. Mm-hmm. So we're not seeing too much of that probably yet in practice, but I think that was the thing that I think was going to unlock more of his potential, is to beat press man coverage at the line and then be able to do more damage downfield.
Yeah, and so my next thing is on the defensive side of the football, switching to the other side. And that is that there has not been many rotations at the safety position in terms of who the starters are through pretty much the whole offseason, through OTAs and through mandatory minicamp. Savage and Rudy Ford have been pretty much exclusively the starters at safety. I think we were both expecting more of an open competition, given the fact that Savage wasn't great last year, and Amos, the other incumbent starter, is gone. And Savage was actually benched last year for Ford, which is interesting. And I think I haven't seen any of Tarvarius Moore, Owens, or Anthony Johnson Jr. get any reps with the ones, which is really surprising given the fact that Owens started almost every game for the Texans last year and is a plus tackler, which you'd think would complement Savage quite a bit, given that Savage is not a plus tackler, at least at this stage of his career, and would kind of help cover for some of those deficiencies. And it just seemed to me that there would be a lot of open competition for that spot, given the fact that there's, I think, looking at the roster, like no clear guy where it's like, hey, this guy's proven a lot in the league. Ford had a couple picks last year and played okay at times and was a pretty good tackler for the Packers when asked to play safety, but he's been a gunner almost his whole career. I mean, they signed him off of Jacksonville's after Jacksonville cut him last year.
He got cut, I think, and so they were able to sign him as a street free agent, basically as a gunner for the special teams. And he looked good to that. They're like, I remember all these plays were like, he and Nixon were like around the ball.
Oh,
and
there.
I think it might have been preseason. It's like, ooh, this is fun. This is exciting. We might actually be able to tackle somebody after just a couple of yards instead of giving up a 50-yard return.
Yeah, but now two of our starting secondary members were both primarily gunners going into last season, which I have higher hopes for Nixon than Ford. I think Ford is okay, but I just was expecting a lot more competition at that spot. What did you think, Dad?
I had the same thought. And maybe it's early. And I have a few notes on this, but I could just talk about it now, and maybe I'll just jump into my, overall defensive back depth chart. It's got to be what I had coming up next anyway. And so, as you said, like they're getting all the starting. And I thought we'd have more of a chance for Owens, who has been a starter and a solid tackler, and Moore, who's been a starter before. It seems like mostly I've heard about Moore during OTAs being kind of the safety 3. So who's safety 3 then? So I think it was Moore for a while. And then at minicamp, where I guess Moore missed some time, started hearing a little bit of a shout out for Owens getting some burn today. I think, and Bill Huber wrote something for an article about the first minicamp that the Packers seem to be high on Jonathan Owens. Mm-hmm. And Johnson seems to be behind both of them right now, and maybe not surprisingly.
Not surprisingly, I mean,
he's a rookie, and both Moore and Owens have had a lot of snaps in the NFL already.
Yeah, and not surprisingly, given that he's a 7th-round rookie. I think, maybe as the season goes on, and he only played safety one season in college. Like he has by far the least experience of anyone on the roster at the position. So I'm not terribly surprised. I was definitely hopeful for him to be getting maybe a crack at it. I know a lot of people are really high on him.
And Ennis Gaines got some reps. I think that he was at safety today, right?
Slot corner.
In the 2s. Oh, that was a slot corner. Okay.
Yeah, Gaines was at slot. So not with the safeties that I saw, at least. The tweet about him that I saw was with him playing slot, and they were talking about how that versatility might help him make the team. Did you want to go ahead and talk about your defensive back depth chart as your next thing to talk about?
Yeah, so that was part of it. So that there seems to be a battle right now for the third safety, at least, and I think it's between Moore and Owens right now. So for the corner group, who's cornerback 4 while Stokes is out? You've got, Jair and Rasul and Nixon locking down the slot.
Well, I think
it seems like it's Valentine already.
From what I've seen, that's not what I had taken away from it. From what I had seen, I think it kind of depended on who was there, because I think we saw when Jair and Rasul were not there, we saw a lot of Shamar John Charles on the outside. We saw some Valentine on the outside, and we saw some... Shoot, who was the other one? I am having trouble remembering off the top of my head. But I know we saw a lot of Shamar John Charles on the outside when Jair and Rasul were not there.
I kind of forgot about that, digging in deeper about when they weren't there. Now, Shamar's playing outside is a little bit of a surprise. I think they drafted him to play in the slot, but I think he mostly played outside in college at App State, right?
No, I think I would actually say that he played a good mix outside and inside. I think he played a good amount inside at Appalachian State, and a lot of people were saying he was going to be mostly an inside guy coming out of college. You can check that, fact check that for me if you want. Might be handy. But I'll vamp for a second. Last year, in the preseason and when he was asked to play, he did play some outside corner, especially in preseason. Now we got to remember he was hurt almost all of last year. With I don't even remember what, but he missed like 7 straight weeks or something like that. But he played...
I don't know what that injury was.
He played a good amount of outside in the preseason and looked pretty good doing it, I thought. He has the strength to do it. Sorry, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, that was maybe his best physical trait was the bench, right?
Yes.
He was very strong and not very fast. So in college, his last 2 years playing the corner, so probably PFF as corner, which is outside. So slot, let me start with slot. Slot, senior year, 12 snaps. Junior year, 16 snaps.
Mm-hmm.
Outside corner, 631 snaps and 736 snaps. Okay, so almost exclusively a boundary corner in college. But they felt like his size and speed maybe would fit better to the slot, as I recall, when they first drafted him.
Yeah, and maybe so. Okay, I was wrong there. Mea culpa. But I will say that the projection from him coming out of college, like you were saying, was slot corner, like a mainly slot only because of that lack of speed and lack of size. I think what is interesting, though, is he did play a good amount of outside in preseason last year, and I thought looked pretty good doing it. And I was just looking up while you were doing that. I was just looking at when Jair and Rasul were not there, they had Ballantyne and Shamar John Charles on the outside with Nixon in the slot, according to Andy Herman. So I would be surprised if I would say at least Shamar John Charles seems ahead of Valentine for now, and then Ballantyne with a B as in boy might be ahead of Valentine with a V as in Victor. For now, at least. Although it does seem like Valentine with a V, as in Victor, is making a lot more noise around.
He's making a little more noise in maybe in the minicamp now. He's making a little more noise,
and in OTAs, there were definitely a couple days of OTAs where they were saying that he made a couple pass breakups on Dobbs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think it's wrong to say that he could definitely be passing those guys already. But just in terms of who was playing when Jair and Rasul weren't there, it was John Charles and Ballantyne. Should I go on to my next one?
Yeah, why don't you go on to your next one now?
Yeah, my next one this was just today. So it's not really a trend like our other ones have been, but I just found it so interesting. And Andy Herman did as well. That's why he tweeted it out. So they've been starting in nickel almost exclusively on defense. Savage and Ford at safety, Jair and Rasul on the outside, Keyshawn Nixon slot corner, Devondre Campbell at middle linebacker with Quay Walker also a middle linebacker, and then Preston Smith, Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, and Justin Hollins or Enigbare, or sometimes, not very often, but Lucas Van Ness sometimes at that other edge rusher spot. But anyway, at nickel. But today, when they switched from nickel to penny, and penny is essentially bringing off a linebacker from that set and putting in a defensive lineman in that set, they opted to take Campbell off the field and put Wyatt on the field. And not so much the interesting part of putting Wyatt on the field, But to have Quay Walker as your solo linebacker in those scenarios, I think is fairly interesting given the fact that Campbell usually wears the green dot. He's the captain. He's more experienced. He's been a first-team All-Pro. And I would just say that is very interesting to me that they would opt to have Quay as the single solo linebacker. I was just wondering what you thought advantages might be from that. Do you think it's a one-time thing? I know it was just a one-time thing in practice, but it's interesting nonetheless.
It's very interesting. Maybe they're just testing it out to see how it works right now. But because Quay seemed to be having trouble with coordinating everything, especially in the beginning, and maybe they're getting more comfortable, and they like his athleticism. And they want to have him try him out as or maybe they're just testing it, see, is this going to work, or is this something we only try out in off season and never? I want to never see that again.
Well, the interesting part to me is, personally, I feel like Campbell's best play has come when he's the only linebacker.
This was the thing about last year when he came in, he says, by chance to be Batman, not be Robin. And he even said he does better when he's like the solo linebacker out there.
Well,
and then they drafted a second linebacker to have him start all the time.
His big thing was he wanted to play middle like Mike linebacker. He didn't want to be the Will. He wanted to be the main Mike linebacker. And I don't think that was necessarily about wanting to be the solo linebacker on the field. It was just that he wanted to play Mike, and he wanted the opportunity to be the guy there. And I think it's fine I think he wasn't saying he wanted to be the solo, but I think just with our eyes we can see he was always. He at least played better the last 2 years when he was the only linebacker on the field. So it's interesting to me that in those only linebacker sets, they're going with Quay when I feel like Campbell's best football has been as in penny looks. That has been his best football.
Yeah. The other thing I would say that's kind of interesting about this whole thing, so in penny, they've got Kenny and Slayton and Wyatt out there. But in nickel, it's Kenny and Slayton.
Yeah.
It's not Kenny and Wyatt.
I'm not surprised.
So when they only have two down linemen, their preference right now seems to be TJ Slayton and Kenny Clark.
Well, I'm not.
And that when they have, and so maybe their base defense, which they will play 10% of the time, will be Wyatt, Slayton, and Kenny Clark.
Well, it's interesting to me because. I mean, it doesn't surprise me too much because Slayton was ahead of Wyatt last season too on the depth chart. But it is a little at least interesting that Wyatt as a first rounder
We're
still
hoping
can't.
that Wyatt's going to make a big jump this year as a first rounder last year, right?
I mean, yeah,
we're hoping.
I think it's at least partially an indictment of Jerry Montgomery if he's not, because you're getting things to work with here. Let's get this show on the road. We're investing in the defensive line. It's your job to make them good.
Speaking of investing in the defensive line, the other thing that's kind of interesting that we don't have in our notes even is we're talking about the defensive line and where it puts that Colby Wooden is the next man up in the defensive line already.
Yeah, and he's getting work with the ones.
Who else is there? But he's getting some work. He's even getting work with the ones.
I said that last time. Of course, who's there? You're stealing my jokes. But no, I think it's good.
That is a long tradition. In the annals of comedy.
Yes, you're right. There's nothing more traditional than stealing jokes. But I think it is interesting. I'm not that surprised. I think the main takeaway is that he's getting work with the ones, which is good. He's not just stuck with the twos as the next man up. And they've just been rotating him in San's injury. So he's just been getting reps, not just to fill in for guys. He's getting reps as a piece that they seem to think is going to get playing time, which is good. Beyond that, do you want to go to your next one, or do you have anything else along the D-line you want to talk about?
That was the main thing I wanted to add to the D-line was a bit about Colby Wooden getting those reps. The other thing I want to take is just sort of the defense as a whole. It's a lot of what we've been hearing about, great play by the offense, great diving catch by Dobbs for a touchdown, Musgrave catching the ball and making plays up the seam. Well, now I think Minicamp's coming along. The defense is saying, just wait a minute. Time for things to get real.
Well, so it helps when you have your two starting corners. It could help.
Your two starting corners. Yeah, this was always that's okay. I want to see how this offense looks when they're going against the top corner. So, just like this, they had the even in the minicamp, so like the passes to Musgrave up the seam, even despite tight coverage by Ford, I think yesterday.
Yeah, we
and
had there was a. Go ahead.
And then the 96-yard touchdown to Watson that happened in the second day of. So this is kind of the success, but now that thing's going on today, I think, or maybe it was just, Love was only 1 of 6 passing in 7-on-7s per Bill Huber of SI, though he did do better. And the one completion was that touchdown to Dobbs against very tight, apparently really good coverage from Jair.
I think that would have been yesterday then.
That was yesterday, right? This is yesterday where there's 1 for 6 with just that touchdown, and though he did better 6-6 in the third down session. Now today we had interception by Campbell in the during walkthroughs.
During walkthrough, yeah.
But then but both of the 2-minute drills ended in picks. First team, Love threw a pick to Jair. I think it was intended for Watson.
Yeah, Love contends that they were going to tackle him and get the ball back after that. Did you see the video of Did you see the video of Jair messing with him during the interview?
I didn't watch the video. I saw that Jair kind of jumped in while they're interviewing.
It's funny.
And he says I saw it was QB1 here. This is QB1.
He said QB1, best quarterback in the league.
Best quarterback in the league.
Tell him not to try me, though, was what he ended it
I
with.
missed the tell him not to try me, though, because he might be the best quarterback in the league, but I'm the best cornerback in the league.
Yeah, and you should go watch the video because it's very funny. I think I retweeted it on the Father Son Packer account, @FatherSonPacker on Twitter, if anyone wants to go find it.
I'll have to watch the rest of that little clip. And then the second team, the backups, also ended their 2-minute drill with a pick from Sean Clifford to Innis Gaines.
I was going to say, I think it was
that
Gaines.
Was a deflected ball. And I don't remember who was targeted on that play. But
yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so the defense forcing turnovers and a lot of incompletions in minicamp now that the starting corners are here.
Right? It's funny how that works, huh? The interesting thing for me on that is they are getting some explosive plays, like that 96-yard one to Watson.
And apparently nobody was near him.
I mean, no one's as fast as him on the team. He's by far the fastest
player
on the team.
Nobody was going to catch up to him after he caught it either. Apparently in stride, beautiful pass.
A couple of busted coverages, it sounds like, for the defense, and that's the only worrying thing is hey,
that was the bugaboo at the beginning of last year.
That was for the whole season. I mean,
okay,
you remember?
I was being overly kind.
I mean, to me, the one that immediately jumps to mind is the Jalen Waddle 96-yard touchdown on the second play of the game versus Miami. Do you remember that one?
I do. When he's with the crossing route
across the field.
So let's see. I'm going to hand this guy off to nobody, and then he's going to get to the sideline and dash up there while the Packers players run into each other trying to close off the sideline.
That's beautiful.
But of course, that still doesn't stick in my head. Even though I was able to, but the game against the Vikings where they're just running wide open all over the field. Yeah, the first game of the year.
It was amazing. It really was. My next thing for the Packers is I actually found it pretty interesting that Hollins has seemed to take over the third edge rusher spot. If you remember, Hollins is a guy that was signed kind of off the Rams practice squad.
No, I think they cut him.
Oh, or did they cut him? Okay, but anyway,
I think they cut Hollins last year. The Rams did, and the Packers were able to scoop him up.
Okay, thank you for that. But they scooped him up from the Rams toward the end of last year, back half of the year, and he actually had some really nice moments. He's a elite athlete, but had never really been more than just a rotational guy in the NFL level. I think it's his 4th or 5th year in the league or something like that. But it's interesting because it seems like today he was working across from Preston Smith while Gary is still not back, over guys like Enigbare, who was ahead of him in the depth chart last year, over guys like Van Ness, who was a first-round pick this season, is a rookie first-round pick who they expect a lot of things from. And, we've seen Enigbare and Van Ness rotate their way in to that number one, to those that number 3 spot alongside Preston Smith. So it's not like we haven't seen them. I just find it interesting that Hollins has made it that high up the depth chart where he was essentially getting first crack at that starting edge rusher spot, with an asterisk since Gary is out. Gary will have that spot when he's back. But he's essentially getting first crack at that spot in these mini camps, and I just found that interesting that they're going that route. Dad, what did you think about that?
Yeah, I was surprised at that because I also feel like Hollins seems to me, maybe before this, a little vulnerable for his roster spot.
You think? I thought he was too good to be vulnerable. You can never have too many edge rushers.
It kind of depends. It's an unlikely scenario, I should say. But I should say vulnerable is not the right word. I could, however, see a path where he doesn't make the team if Brenton Cox, for example, looks really good.
But would you say that now, today, seeing that he was the third
Maybe
guy?
not anymore. This is
Right.
a little bit different. This is before. This is what I was thinking a couple weeks ago, that you have Van Ness, Preston, Gary, Enigbare, and then if you had Cox, would that be your 5? With the ability to have, say, Brooks play a little bit of edge as well.
Only on the goal line.
Yeah. Put him in as a 300-pound edge on running plays.
Yeah. But it seems like Hollins is further along than that.
Yeah.
Which is at
He's
least very
further up the
interesting
depth
to me.
chart. Further up the depth chart than that. I thought that Enigbare would be ahead of him right now.
Same.
That's the part that's probably the most surprising. Is I thought that at this point of the season, Enigbare would be ahead of him.
I thought at this point of the season, Lucas Van Ness would be pretty much
That
locked
too.
into that spot. And
that Hollins would be 4.
yeah, that's without Gary. That Hollins would be 4. And it's kind of surprising that he's 2 without Gary, which is shocking to me. And that was the next piece I had. Dad, you had one more, right? One more to go?
I had one more little bit, and that was like Udfuzz with the most buzz, and we've mentioned them both already. Brenton Cox got a shout out from LaFleur when he was asked who were kind of outstanding players during OTAs. It wasn't even like outstanding Udfuzz.
He said
Cox got
outstanding rookies was
outstanding,
the
yes,
question.
outstanding rookies. But it was Cox, Wooden, Van Ness,
and Brooks.
Yeah,
Pretty much
so
the whole D line. He said the whole D line's looking good.
was who's
playing offensive line?
Who's playing that offensive line again? And then the other one,
check the tape,
is Malik Heath, as you mentioned. He keeps popping up on the Twitter feed. You guys make almost every day that people are watching, he's making some kind of play. And he's had a lot more buzz so far this spring than Bo Melton, who, I don't know if I've heard anything from. And he was a guy I was penciling in as a starter, not a starter, but making the 53 as the 7th receiver. So maybe Heath's already ahead of him. And you mentioned something about Heath, is he was actually more productive in college last year for Mississippi State than second-round pick, right? Second-round pick?
Yeah, Jonathan Mingo. So him and Jonathan Mingo both went to Ole Miss together.
Did I say Mississippi State?
I think you might have. You might get in trouble.
I'm going to get hate mail now.
Yeah, I know, right? And I'm trying to pull up because Mingo did miss a lot of last season with Ole Miss. I think he got hurt early in the season. But Malik Heath was actually the leading receiver for Ole Miss last year, I believe. And I'm trying to see if it was the last 2 years. And let me just pull this up. But I just think that's interesting. Do you want to talk a little bit about Brenton Cox while I pull up the Malik Heath stuff?
Yeah, so Brenton Cox, we've mentioned him a couple times as he's a bit of a steal as a UDFA because of, behavioral problems, really. He had the talent to be drafted, maybe like a 4th rounder. Or after his freshman year, people thought he might be one of the best players in the SEC by the time he was done. But he managed to get himself kicked out of Georgia. And it's unclear exactly why. He had some issues and smoked some weed, which, if he was in California, who cares? And then he was on Florida, and at least what we know is he got into a fight with a Georgia player on the field, former teammate, Broderick Jones.
I don't know for sure.
It was an offensive lineman on Georgia, I believe. And then not too long after that, he got kicked out. Is that the only thing or last straw? I don't know. But if he can mature and keep his nose clean, he's got decent burst and closing speed if you watch his highlights. In terms of if he's got a route to the quarterback, he closes on him fast. So he could be some quality edge depth if he, keeps his head on straight.
Yeah, and I'm just pulling up the Malik Heath and Jonathan Mingo stuff. So Mingo and Heath both played the same number of games last year for Ole Miss, 13 games. You might have gotten confused, however, because Malik Heath actually played 2 seasons at Mississippi State and then transferred to Ole Miss. So that's something.
He must be hated by Mississippi State fans.
Yeah, they must not like him very much. But both of them played 13 games, and Malik Heath had over 100 more receiving yards and 9 more catches. Along with the same number of touchdowns. So he actually outperformed Mingo when they were both at Ole Miss together. And Mingo was essentially top of the second round. I think he was like a top 5 pick in the second round, top 50 pick. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you want to get excited about Malik Heath, there's definitely something there you could get excited about.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I'm trying to remember now, that maybe Mingo was the first wide receiver of the second round taken?
Yes.
He was pretty, right? He was taken before Reed was.
Yes, he was the first receiver of the second round, 5th receiver taken overall, I believe. So not nothing, and Malik Heath outplayed him. And then my last thing, as we're getting a little long here on time, is that Anders Carlson is looking pretty solid. Obviously, it is just minicamp. We didn't see him at all really during OTAs, the open OTAs. We just saw him during minicamp. One of those days was indoors and one was outdoors. He went 5 of 6 in the indoor session, missing from 44, but with 2 makes past 50 yards. And then he went 6 of 6 today. No long kicks past 50 yards, but made all of his kicks. So overall, 11 of 12. Hey, I'll take it. That's pretty good.
And I think, did you mention that LaFleur said he's really got a lot of leg? He's booting it.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big guy.
You see some of the tape, which I don't know how far away he was kicking from, but that ball is hitting way up on the wall inside the Don Hudson Center during the first minicamp practice when they're inside. Yeah. So one thing about I was going to say Mingo versus Malik Heath. So one reason why I think they're drafted differently is
it's the athleticism.
Their RAS.
Yes. Yeah. It's the athleticism.
Mingo's RAS is 9.87 and Heath's is 6.58.
Yeah, no. Malik Heath is not a plus athlete. I think Mingo in some ways is capitalizing on the DK Metcalf thing, where Metcalf was this big athletic freak at Ole Miss, same college, look really similar, in the helmet and the uniform, both built to just jacked and massive athletes, and I think Mingo's benefiting from that somewhat.
But I think Mingo's not as big, I don't think, and not as fast as DK
It would be
Metcalf.
hard to be.
But Heath is also a big guy. He's a big bodied but not very fast receiver.
Yeah, good possession receiver. We'll see.
Yeah, so we'll see what he does.
Do you have anything else you want to say on Carlson, or should we wrap up?
No, I just say that the deep dive for some hopium on Carlson, maybe it's all going to come true.
Maybe. But anyway, thank you so much for listening to our breakdown of minicamp and OTAs for the Packers. We really appreciate it. Like we said, if you like what you heard, come give us a follow on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. Come check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Father Son Packers Podcast. We really appreciate a follow and a subscribe. It would really help our numbers. We'll be doing an episode here every single week through the offseason, and then 2 a week once the season starts. We're really excited for that. Really excited to see what Jordan Love might bring. Really excited to see what these rookies have got going for them. So come give us a listen. We'll be along for the ride with you. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.